What if I could give you an accurate measure of how well your relationships are doing? That is, friendships, business partnerships, and, romantic relationships. Or how happy you will be in the future based on the actions of today. Hey guys, I'm Soma, and this is something that I have been using for a long time, 5+ years, to help guide my actions, to make sure that I don't have a breakdown at 50, to make sure that when I look back at my life, I am happy and content with it. To make sure that all of my friendships and all of my relationships work for as long as humanly possible. Because though not all of them can last forever, I can certainly extend the life of a friendship or a business partnership using this theory. And I do want you to watch this video all the way to the end, and I want you to give this video a like or a thumbs up if you found it useful, because in the beginning, it's probably not going to make a lot of sense, because I am going to be working with a metaphor, and I need to explain this metaphor. So with all of that out of the way, what is this theory that allows me to optimize my own happiness? And that is what I like to call the friction theory, or the friction framework. Now, to apply this, I want you to imagine dragging a rock across concrete. This represents your life, or it can represent a potential relationship between you and another person. Obviously, as you're dragging this rock along the ground, in the beginning, it's gonna be cool, it's gonna be kind of fun to drag it across the ground, but after a while, because of friction, remember friction theory, it's gonna start heating up. And as you're dragging it across the ground, over time, it's gonna get hotter and hotter and hotter. But in the beginning, it's not gonna be too hot. It's gonna be, a light, kind of a pleasant little warmth. And then after a while, it's gonna start to get hot. And you're gonna be like, this is getting a little hot, this is getting a little hot. And then eventually it becomes so hot that you drop it. And you drop the stone. And that represents the breaking off of a relationship. That represents you dropping a friendship. Or that represents you having a breakdown because you just looked back at your life and you looked back at all of your decisions, and all of your decisions amounted to a breakdown. And that is something that I want to avoid, and that is something that I really want you guys to avoid, because I really hate seeing older people, or honestly people my age, having a breakdown because they don't like their life so far. And that is why I came up with this theory, and that is why I'm presenting it to you today. Now, the important part of this theory is specifically the friction aspect of it, because it is this friction that allows you to heat up the rock, where eventually you drop it because it burns your hand. And on the flip side of that, if we decrease the amount of friction, that means we can drag the rock across the ground, aka we can live our lives for as long as possible without having that rock heat up so much that it scalds your hand and you're forced to drop it. If you're liking this video so far, please smash that like button and leave a comment down below saying you understand it or you don't understand it. Feedback is always welcome. So now that we have the metaphor and the framework down, I'm going to give you a whole bunch of examples just so you can kind of grasp it more. And essentially all you're looking for is, will this thing help me out in the long run? Will it increase the friction? And essentially you can just look at this as delayed gratification. But I think looking at it in the friction theory framework will be a lot more visceral, and it will help you out a lot more because it is less of an abstract concept and it is more of a will this rock burn me concept. So the first and most obvious example is, let's take a look at your health. Now, what would happen to your health and to your life, as well as to the amount of friction that rock has, if you ate junk food and fried food and just bad foods every single day? Well, every single time you ate it, your friction went up a little bit, your health went down, and therefore your overall life goes down. Because eventually, when you're 50, 60, you're gonna regret having eaten so much bad food. Yes, in the moment, it feels good. However, in the long run, if you perpetually eat McDonald's, you're not gonna be a happy camper. And applying friction theory to this, every time you eat a hamburger and you increase your friction a little bit, your rock gets a little bit more hot every single time. Eventually, you will get burnt. Eventually, it will catch up to you because reality, unfortunately, is persistent. And so, if you perpetually ignore your problems, essentially, they will pile up and eventually you will be presented with the bill. And another one that applies to me today is I gotta make a whole bunch of phone calls. And I know that if I make a whole bunch of phone calls, my life will be better. However, I don't really like making a lot of phone calls. To me, they're kind of a waste of time. I just kind of don't want to do them. But I know I have to. And I know by sticking to it and actually making all those phone calls, my life will improve in the long run. This will in turn decrease the amount of friction in my life because essentially now I have a lot more self-respect because now I've given myself a task and I have successfully completed that task. And by doing that, I have increased my own self-esteem, thereby decreasing the friction, thereby allowing me to live a much happier life in the long run. So essentially for your life, ask yourself, will this help me out in the future? Will this make my rock hotter or will it make it cooler? In terms of relationships, again, both friendships, business, and romantic relationships, the number one thing you can do is to find people that have the least amount of friction. And this is most evident in relationships where you can clearly tell that they will split up. They will split up because they have a lot of friction between the two of them. There is a lot of things that say they disagree on, or that they don't like doing together, or something like that. And in the beginning, you can ignore that because the rock is nice and cool. But as things start to move on, as things start to become a little more frictionful and a little bit hotter, eventually that rock gets so hot that you drop it, and that results in a breakup. The same thing can happen with a friendship. So in the beginning, you start out as good friends, and the rock is nice and cool. But eventually, you do something that makes the other person resent you a little bit, and a little bit more friction comes on. And the more friction comes on, generally speaking, the easier it is to actually increase the friction. Because, once I hurt them, then they hurt me back, then I hurt them back, and so on and so forth until it becomes a tit for tat. And again, the rock gets so hot that you drop it, and it's just not good. It's just the end of a beautiful friendship, or a potentially beautiful friendship. Whereas, if you say you do something nice for your friend, or you go out of your way to really pay attention to them and to really listen to them, and then eventually all of those things will start to decrease the amount of friction in that relationship, and you'll allow it to be a lot more perpetual. So just to kind of recap everything, essentially, all of your actions will cause more friction in your life. You want to eliminate as much friction as possible by thinking, will it help me in the long run, or will it not help me in the long run? Will it increase the friction in my life, thereby making my little proverbial rock hotter, eventually causing me to drop it? Or will I be able to continue on pushing this rock on the ground the way it is forever? If you've made it this far in the video and you want to learn more, please hit that subscribe button because I will have a lot more of these coming to you in the very near future. If you like this video too, please hit that like button and let me know in the comments down below what you actually thought of this theory. Was this useful? Was this just mumbo jumbo? Or are you able to actually apply this to your life in a much better way? I'll likely be making more of these videos on this topic because I think there are just other examples and other things that I could say about this theory that would make it a lot easier to grasp and a lot more useful for you. So once again, tune in for that, hit that subscribe button. I will see you next time.